In 1948, a man named James walked out of a church in Natchez, Mississippi, with his hat pressed low and his shoes shining under the porch light. He had a church bulletin in one pocket and a green book in the other. 3 years earlier, he had been fighting in the Pacific. Now he was home in a country where the wrong road after dark could become a problem before he said one word. The sheriff was 12 miles away, if he came at all. What kept that night from becoming worse was not a badge. It was something small in James's coat pocket, something his father had given him before he shipped out. Number 23 was carried by police before ordinary men were punished for owning the same thing. Number 18 was banned by name before most people even knew what it was. Number 8 belonged to the grandmothers. And number 1 is not really a weapon at all. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 outlawed self-defense weapons every black grandfather carried in his coat pocket. Number 25. The roll of pennies. A man in Birmingham in 1953 did not leave the house on payday without a tight roll of pennies in his pocket. To anyone else, it was change from the bank. To him, it was weight. 30 coins wrapped in paper, smooth against the palm, ordinary enough to pass through any church door, courthouse line, train station, or company store, without raising a question. That was the genius. A blackjack could get him searched before he reached the corner. Pennies could not. His daughter found that old roll years later in the kitchen drawer next to a rusted can opener and a box of birthday candles. The paper had turned yellow around the edges. The coins were still inside. She never spent them. Number 24. The straight razor. Every black barbershop in the South had one stropped and ready. Every man who sat in that chair knew what it was. In Meridian, Mississippi, in 1951, a barber named Clarence kept a Sheffield razor folded inside a white cloth. In the morning, it gave a man the cleanest shave of his life. At night, it rode in the inside coat pocket because nobody could accuse a grown man of carrying the tool he used on his own face. 4 inches of steel in a folded handle, no story to explain unless somebody wanted to make one. Clarence shaved with that razor for 40 years. After his funeral, his grandson found it wrapped in the same cloth, still resting in the top drawer. Number 23. The leather sap. A leather sap was small enough for a coat pocket and heavy enough to end a bad moment fast. Deputies carried them. Night watchmen carried them. Doormen carried them. Then the rules changed, and the same object that had once been official equipment became something ordinary people could be punished for owning. In New Orleans, a black doorman named Ellis kept one near the coat room in 1955. His job was to stop trouble without calling people who might bring more trouble with them. The sap was flat leather, spring steel, and weight hidden in plain sight. When the club closed, Ellis wrapped it in a rag and placed it under the register. By morning, it looked like nothing at all. Number 22. The switchblade. In 1957, a switchblade was not a movie prop. It was a working knife that opened with one hand. That mattered if the other hand held a rope, a lunch pail, a child, or a bag of groceries. Then came the Federal Switchblade Act of 1958, and a tool men had carried for years became dangerous in the eyes of the law. A man in Memphis was stopped at a train station in 1959. The officer emptied his pockets. No charge came. The knife never came back. His father had given him that knife when he turned 15. After that day, he carried a slower blade and spoke less when he traveled. Number 21. The knuckle duster. Brass knuckles had one purpose, which is why the law learned their name early. But before they became a symbol in courtroom files, they moved through American life more openly than people imagine. Pawn shops had them. Some workers kept them in lunch pails. Some men carved rough versions from hardwood. when metal brought too much attention. A black man in St. Louis in 1931 could not afford to be caught with one, but that did not mean he had never seen one. It meant he knew exactly who could carry certain things and who could not. His brother kept a pair wrapped in a handkerchief under a loose floorboard. The family found them after the house was sold. If your grandfather always seemed calm, it may be because he had already measured the room before he entered it. Number 20. The loaded cane. A cane changed how people saw a man. Old, tired, respectable, harmless. That was why some grandfathers loved them. A minister in Atlanta in 1946 carried a black cane with a polished head. He had no limp. He had dignity, and that was what people saw. Some canes were weighted in the handle. Some carried hidden steel. Some were simply made from wood so dense it did not need help. A cane could rest beside a church pew, a train seat, or a courthouse bench without anyone asking a question. The minister's cane leaned near his Bible every Sunday. His children were told never to play with it. They listened. Number 19. The boot knife. A boot knife lived below the trouser cuff, where most eyes did not go. In Tallahassee, Florida, in 1954, a railroad cook named Samuel wore one against his left ankle. He called it a work knife. That was the only name he ever gave it. On paper, it cut rope, cloth, and meat sacks. In real life, it meant he was not empty-handed when the train stopped somewhere he did not know. A visible knife could invite questions. A hidden one could get him home. Every morning, Samuel put it on before his left boot. His wife saw him do it and never asked why. Number 18. The slungshot. A slungshot was one of the oldest forbidden weapons in America. A small weight, a short cord, easy to hide, easy to misunderstand until it was already moving. Dock workers knew them. Sailors knew them. Men who worked around rope, freight, rail yards, and riverboats knew them. In port cities like Charleston, Savannah, and New Orleans, black laborers saw enough of that world to understand what could be made from scraps. Many states banned slungshots by name long before modern weapon laws existed. That is what made them different. The law knew exactly what they were. An old longshoreman in Savannah kept one in a tobacco tin. His grandson thought it was fishing gear until he was grown. Number 17. The tire thumper. Black men who drove for a living carried more than maps. A truck driver from Little Rock kept a short wooden thumper under his seat in 1952. The official reason was tires. You struck the rubber and listened to the sound. But roads had moods. Some gas stations served you, some did not. Some towns had signs. Others had men standing outside who did not need signs. A tire thumper was legal because trucks needed checking. The policeman told the truth. It stayed under the seat, close enough for the driver's hand to find in the dark. His son found it years later and asked why it was so close. His father said, because the tires were close. Number 16. The heavy belt buckle. Before belt buckles became fashion, working men wore them heavy. Solid brass, sometimes cast iron, half a pound, sitting at the waist like it belonged there. A man in Jackson, Mississippi, in 1956, wore his best belt to work, to church, and to the barbershop. The buckle clanked against the dresser every night when he took it off. 3 feet of leather gave it reach, the buckle gave it weight, but the real protection was that no law could make a belt suspicious by itself. His grandson remembered the sound more than the belt. That heavy knock on the wood sounded like the house locking itself for the night. Here is what the first 10 entries are really telling you. Your grandfather was not paranoid, he was accurate. The Green Book could tell him where to sleep. It could tell him which barbershop would serve him and which hotel would let him through the door. But it could not protect the miles between one safe place and the next. Every item on this list lived in those miles. If you want to carry your grandmother's knowledge forward, the link is in the description. Number 15. The palm sap. The palm sap was quieter than the leather sap and harder to see. Flat leather. Lead shot inside, small enough to disappear inside a closed hand. A leather worker in Birmingham made them for men who came through someone trusted. No sign in the window, no price on the wall, just a nod, a measurement, and a finished piece a week later. A visible weapon could get a black man searched before he took 10 steps. A palm sap did not print through a coat. It made no outline. It asked for no explanation. The old leather worker died in 1972. His tools went to a nephew who thought they were for wallets. Number 14. The small derringer. A derringer was not for hunting. It was not for show. It was small enough to disappear in a coat pocket, a Bible box, or the bottom of a purse. In Baton Rouge in 1949, a widow named Alma kept one wrapped in a handkerchief inside the top drawer of her dresser. She never called it a gun. She called it that little thing. Everyone in the house knew what drawer she meant. For black families, firearm ownership was never simple. In some places, it was protection. In others, the weapon itself could become the danger. Alma kept hers hidden because the house was hers, the children were hers, and the night was long. Number 13. The hat pin. This one belongs to the grandmothers. Church hats in the Black South were not small things. They had height, shape, flowers, feathers, and steel pins long enough to hold everything in place. A woman walking home from church in Montgomery in 1958 carried one openly through the street. It was fashion. It was dignity. It was also one of the few sharp objects a respectable woman could carry without explaining herself to anybody. In some cities, hat pin length had already been restricted after women used them to defend themselves. But the hats stayed. The pin stayed. Her granddaughter still has one in a jewelry box, too long for any hat she owns. Number 12. The ice pick. Every kitchen with an ice box had 6 inches of steel, wooden handle, usually in the drawer near the can key and the bottle opener. A woman in Macon, Georgia, kept hers in the same drawer for 31 years. She used it for ice a few times. The rest of the time, it was just there. That was the cover. No officer could say a woman had no reason to own an ice pick when the iceman still came down the block. Her youngest son remembered the drawer more than the object. It stuck in the summer. His mother always knew exactly how hard to pull. Number 11. The razor strop. The strop hung in the bathroom like furniture. 2 feet of thick leather, dark from years of oil and use. A man in Mobile, Alabama, in 1949, pulled his razor across that leather every Sunday morning before church. The sound was part of the house. Long scrape, turn, long scrape again. But every man who owned one knew the other use. In a tight hallway, a strop could move fast. It looked like grooming because it had lived beside the sink for 20 years. When safety razors came in, the strop disappeared from the bathroom wall. So did one more thing your grandfather never had to name. Number 10. The hollowed Bible. A family Bible could sit on a table for 20 years without anyone opening it except the people who knew what was inside. In a house outside Tuskegee, Alabama, a grandfather carved the pages by hand until a small pistol fit inside the Book of Psalms. The cover closed flat. Nothing showed from the outside. This was not about disrespect. It was about knowing which objects strangers were less likely to touch. The same Bible was read on Sunday morning and reached for when dogs barked after midnight. His daughter said she never liked that book sitting by the bed. Her father said that was why it worked. If the first half of this list was about what looked ordinary, the next half is about what the law learned to recognize. That is where the story changes. Number 9. The cast iron skillet near the bed. This one belongs to the grandmothers, too. A 12-inch Griswold skillet weighed close to 8 pounds. Smooth black iron, cornbread in the morning, protection at night. In a shotgun house in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, a woman named Ruth kept hers on a chair beside the bed when her husband worked nights. If the latch moved, she had 4 seconds. 4 seconds was enough to stand up and reach down. No one called it a weapon. It was a skillet. It fried chicken, baked cornbread, and slept beside the woman who ran the house. Her granddaughter still cooks in it. The handle is worn smooth where Ruth's hand used to sit. Number 8. The cut-down shotgun under the floorboards. A shotgun over the fireplace was visible. A shorter one under a loose board was something else. In rural Mississippi, a family might live far enough from town that help was not a plan. It was a hope. A father outside Greenwood kept an old shotgun hidden beneath the floor near the bed. The weapon had been altered years earlier, back when people did things in sheds and did not write them down. Today, that kind of weapon can bring serious federal charges. Back then, he was thinking about the door, the children, and the distance between his house and the nearest person willing to help. His wife swept over that board every morning. Number 7. The axe handle behind the door. Not the axe, the handle, hickory, 30 inches, leaning behind the back door in a house in Macomb, Mississippi, because that was where useful things lived. A full axe was too much. A handle said something different. It could move someone out of the doorway without turning the whole night into a funeral. A woman named Lottie kept hers beside the screen door until 1984. Her daughter told her the neighborhood had changed. Lottie looked at the handle, then at the lock, then back at her daughter. She said, "Locks are for honest people." The handle stayed there another year. Number 6. The trench knife. Some weapons came from hardware stores. This one came from war. The U.S. Model 1918 trench knife had a blade, a knuckle guard, and a heavy end made for close quarters. Black veterans brought home many things after war: medals, photos, old uniforms. Sometimes they brought home something wrapped in oilcloth and placed in the dresser drawer. A veteran in Tuscaloosa kept his there until he died in 1961. He had served a country that still made him step aside at a water fountain. The knife stayed under folded shirts, silent and sharp. His grandson found it after the funeral and knew not to touch the edge. The law did not have to ban every object on this list. It only had to make the wrong man explain why he had it. That was the burden your grandfather carried. Not just the object, but the explanation. What is this? Why do you have it? Where are you going? Who gave it to you? A farmer could carry a knife and be called prepared. A black grandfather could carry the same knife and be called suspicious. So he learned the safest objects were the ones nobody could name too quickly. The link is in the description. Number 5. The pocket knife passed down. A 2-blade folder with a bone handle could cost less than $2 and last half a lifetime. In Orangeburg, South Carolina, in 1957, a grandfather gave one to his grandson behind the shed. He did not make a speech. He showed him how to oil the hinge, how to close it slow, and which counties not to open it in. That was the part other boys did not have to learn. The knife cut twine, sharpened pencils, opened feed sacks, and cleaned fish. But in the wrong pocket, on the wrong road, it could become a charge before it became a question. The boy kept it wrapped in a sock for 30 years. Number 4. The Green Book route. This was not a weapon made of metal, wood, or leather. It was paper. But for a black traveler in 1955, the Green Book could be the difference between reaching the next town and finding out too late that the next town did not want him there. A man driving from Georgia to Chicago marked the safe stops before he left. Which gas station, which hotel, which house took travelers. which road to avoid after sundown. The route was protection before the pocket ever mattered. His daughter remembered the book folded on the dashboard, her father tapping it with 2 fingers before every turn. He was not lost. He was calculating. Number 3. The sewn-in Sunday coat pocket. This is where the list gets smarter. Black tailors in cities like New Orleans, Atlanta, Memphis, and Birmingham understood how a coat should hang. They also understood weight. A normal pocket sagged when it carried something heavy. A reinforced pocket inside the lining could hold an object close to the hip without changing the shape of the coat. The man looked clean. The jacket moved. Right. Nothing showed. A deacon in Birmingham had 2 suits made that way in 1952. His son thought the extra pocket was for money. Years later, he understood why his father always touched the lining before leaving the house. The final 2 entries are different. They are not about what he carried. They are about how he survived being seen. Number 2. The explanation he practiced before leaving home. Before a black grandfather stepped out the door, he already knew what every object was called. Pennies were money. A cane was for walking. A knife was for work. A thumper was for tires. The words mattered because the object was only half the danger. The other half was the story he had to tell if someone stopped him and asked why he had it. A man in Montgomery taught his teenage son this in 1959 while standing by the front door. He pointed at the boy's pocket and said, "If you cannot explain it calmly, do not carry it." The boy remembered that sentence longer than he remembered the object. Number 1. The Sunday coat itself. Every object on this list lived somewhere. A pocket, a boot, a drawer, a nail behind the door, but the Sunday coat carried the meaning of all of it. A well-pressed coat over a clean shirt said a black man had thought carefully about the world before stepping into it. The coat was dignity. It was armor. It was a system. The grandfather who dressed carefully every morning was not vain. He was precise. He knew how the world looked at him, and he made that look work in his favor when he could. Inside that coat was a calculation he ran before every road, every county, every walk home after dark. What time he would leave, which pocket he would use, what he could explain if stopped, what he could not afford to show. He dressed to survive. He survived. He raised people who survived. Those people raised you. Here is the challenge. Ask the oldest person you know about the oldest person they knew. Ask what was behind the door. Ask what stayed under the seat. Ask what was in the coat pocket, the dresser drawer, the Bible box, or the kitchen drawer that nobody touched without permission. Drop a name in the comments. The person, the place, the year if you know it. These men and women were not looking for trouble. They were making sure trouble did not get the final word. That knowledge did not disappear. It just got quiet. It is time to start listening again.